I know that choosing a bank account can be overwhelming, especially when you're choosing your first one, but know that there's always an opportunity, again, to open a different bank if you don't like the bank that you're with. And banking should be a positive experience and one that you enjoy and one that comes with ease as well.
You're listening to IBKR's Sense of Security. Find more conversations at ibkrpodcast.com. Please remember, any trading discussions are for information purposes only and are not intended to portray recommendations. Please listen to further disclosures at the end of today's episode. Now, welcome to our show.
Welcome back to the Sense of Security podcast. I'm Cassidy Clement, Senior Manager of SEO and Content at Interactive Brokers. Today, I am your host for our podcast. Our guest is Elizabeth Ayoola. She is NerdWallet's banking spokesperson and a writer. There is more to a bank than just a place to store your cash. Several types of banks or products can be offered to you, but what best fits your circumstance? That's what we're going to discuss today. So welcome to the program, Elizabeth.
Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here.
Great. So since you're on your first episode for us, if you want to give the listeners a little bit about your background, that'd be very helpful.
Of course. So Elizabeth, who is myself, is a personal finance writer, and I've been writing finance topics for about 4 years now. Wow, feels like a long time. I'm also a spokesperson at NerdWallet, and I cover a range of topics, including banking, which we'll be talking about today, investing, and sometimes taxes too.
Great. So just to kick off the topic in general, what types of banks are there to choose from? Growing up, I was in a smaller town in the Northeast, and it was like, okay, we have a few of the main ones, a regional one, and then a credit union, which was a little confusing. So what types are out there? I'm sure a lot of listeners had the same experience as myself if they didn't live in a big city.
Right. It can be so overwhelming. So even when I reached adult age and I had to basically choose a bank, I'm like, wow, this is too much. So there's two ways that you can break it down in terms of the type of banks there are. There's the type of accounts that there are, and then there are the type of banks. So to start with the banks, you have national banks, and those are usually your brick and mortar banks. And the benefit of these is they have a range of different products that you can choose from. You also have regional and community banks, and these are usually smaller national banks, and they're a lot more relationship focused. You have credit unions, which I personally am a fan of and use, and these are not-for-profit banks. And one of the benefits of them is that they usually have low to no checking fees, yay for that, and lower interest rates on loans. You also have online banks, which are becoming so much more pervasive now. I have 2 online banks. And the benefit of these banks is they usually have high rates for savings, and also they don't usually have many monthly fees, if any at all. The disadvantage is usually they don't have brick and mortar locations. And then you also have neobanks, and these are relatively new banks, and they're mostly fintech companies who partner with banks to offer mobile-first bank accounts.
So just to go in a little bit deeper, what differentiates them? How would like a credit union differentiate from your standard larger bank? How exactly does that work?
So there are different differentiators, again, which is where it can get confusing, which is why I love comparison charts, because it helps you look at the different products side by side. So for example, for a credit union, that is usually non-for-profit bank, whereas a national bank is for-profit. Another thing with credit unions is, as I mentioned, they usually have low to no checking fees, whereas your national banks might have fees. I actually have both. So I love this question because I closed my national bank, which I had for years today, actually, and stuck with my credit union because there were no fees. And I just felt like, why am I paying fees when I can get an account for free? Another thing with national banks versus credit unions is national banks usually have a lot more branches, whereas credit unions might be more scanty. So I think in order not to get lost in all of the detail of kind of the different type of banks, a good starting place is asking yourself, what do I need from an account?
Are there certain ways to tell whether one bank is, I guess, essentially better than another? Obviously, you mentioned there's going to be a circumstance to your own situation or what you favor, but is there kind of a way to say like, okay, objectively, bank A is better than bank B or something like that?
I'm going to start generally and say that some things that people should think about when asking themselves, is this bank better than this bank, is fees. So Most of us don't want to pay fees when we're banking, but in some situations you might need to. But you want to think about fees. Who has the lowest fees or no fees at all? Some kind of common fees that you might see come up are monthly maintenance, inactivity, overdraft fees, and sometimes these fees can be waived as well. You also want to look at maybe sign-up rewards. So are you going to get a sign-up bonus for joining a certain bank? You want to think about technology. I know we are in the tech age. I personally am a little backwards, so I am not that big on tech, but some people are, and they want a really good app when they're banking or something that's easy to navigate. So think about that. And then two other things to think about are customer service and whether the account has FDIC insurance or any kind of insurance to cover you if the bank goes bust. So those are some things you want to keep in mind. But now when you're asking, as I mentioned earlier, what bank is best for me or what bank is better for me, think about why you need this account. Some of the factors that you might consider are, do I want to make several, international wire transfers a month? And which bank is going to be better for that and offer me the lowest fees for that? So you want to maybe list out 3 to 5 things that are important features for you to have in a bank, and then compare the different banks and the services they offer and choose based on that.
You mentioned a handful of items that you want to look for, but are there core items that someone would look for in a bank that's, I guess you can kind of say, the basics that you want to be there if you decide to go with them? Maybe it's lending, savings accounts, checking accounts. Like, what are those core things that people should be looking for to be like, yeah, that may be the place to park this amount of money?
I think based on that, people should think about what they need now and also long term. Because sometimes with banking, we think about what we need now, but we're not thinking about the future. So as an example, I might just say, starting out right now, all I need is a basic checkings account to pay my bills, and I need a savings account to put my emergency fund in. Whereas I currently am not a homeowner, but I would hope to be in the next couple of years. So something I might want to think about also in a bank for the long term is one that offers good loan products, so I might want to look at the lending products that they offer as well. So I would just say, again, it still kind of just ties back to what are your needs, because everybody's needs are extremely different. So loan products are something to look at, savings accounts. But I think it's also important to insert here that you don't have to try to get everything in one bank. It's okay to have several bank accounts. As I mentioned earlier, I currently have 3, and they all serve different purposes for me. So it's okay to kind of shop around and have different accounts that meet your different needs.
I think you really touched on something that's important, that you have different scenarios in your life. So you might have a certain bank for certain needs, maybe one for the homeownership and one for your savings account and one for where your paycheck goes, something like that. But when our listeners or anybody is thinking about selecting a bank, what are some items that people might not initially think about when doing the final decision? I know one that a lot of people don't think about. They sometimes look initially at the numbers because it's a numbers service, is the online customer service or customer service in general. That's a big one, because it's your money. If something goes wrong, you want to be able to get in touch with somebody. And as you mentioned, online banking, you think that it's a given in today's day and age, but there's a chance that their online customer service, if you need to get in there and talk to somebody at 2 a.m., there's a chance that might not be as good.
Yes, absolutely. So I love those. That's really, really important. I know that it is very annoying when I need to get through to my bank and I have to wait maybe, an hour or 2 on the phone just to get through to someone. So you definitely want to think about customer service. I think another important thing to think about is your minimum balance requirements. Again, the account I recently closed, that was one of the reasons I closed it as well, because I get charged a fee if my balance is under a certain amount. Whereas with the other accounts I have, there is no minimum balance requirement. You also want to think about overdraft fees. How much are you going to get charged if maybe you don't have enough in your account and, a payment comes out? You want to compare that as well. I think ATM access is an important one as well. If you need to withdraw cash, do they have enough ATMs nearby? And also, do they waive the fee? Because some banks, if you use an ATM out of network, will waive the fee for you. And this is a fun one I will add as well, which is one of the reasons I am sticking to one of my new banks, is cashback rewards, which I love, love, love. So I get cash basically just for spending money. And I think that's a great perk to have in an account as well, because you can redirect those funds to different kind of financial needs. And essentially it's passive income.
The one that resonated with me, at least for, let's say, the new employees or new graduates, ATMs and banking branches. When you move for a job across the world, across the state, across the town, if you don't have a car or if there's not a lot of public transportation and you need to get to a bank and it's not in your region or your area, you might find yourself in a bit of a panic. And, where our office is here in Greenwich, we're not far from New York City where there's a lot of different banks. But guess what? It's a different state line when you take that train over to Connecticut. It's a different world over here. So the banks might not be the same. And that's something really to think about if you're taking on a different banking function. As you said, if you're saying, oh, this is my spending money bank, well, hopefully you got an ATM nearby if you're a person who likes cash. Because otherwise, you're going to have to hope that they waive those fees at the gas station ATM that you use, or wherever you decide to go.
Exactly. And I know that I have been in situations like that where there wasn't a, ATM nearby. And I ended up being charged high fees and my bank did not waive those fees. So again, and I think sometimes it took me so long to close this particular account because it's the first one I had and I had a sentimental attachment to it. But then when you kind of just weigh out the pros and cons and see how much maybe you're spending in all of these unnecessary fees, then you realize, hey, maybe there's a better bank out there for me. So all that to say, don't feel like you're cheating on your bank if you decide to go and open a different one elsewhere.
Yeah, it's important to understand that some of them, it may be a sizing limitation. Like, if it's a more of a rural bank, it may be the sizing limitation. You may have fees associated if you get paper statements. Don't forget about that one. Now that we're in 2024, I've had that happen where they call you and say, hey, surprise, remember that account that you opened at 16? Well, we know we're old school, but those statements that we're sending you, you got to log in to this old platform and change it up to paperless, or we're going to charge you for the statements about your account. That's the day and age we're in. Trees cost money, so they're going to ask you if you can pay. But these are things to really think about as you start to embark on your financial journey.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And those amounts may seem insignificant, but they can definitely be used for something else other than paying an unnecessary fee.
So it's important in a way to think about also, if you're going to do the quote unquote parking your money, also if they have any products that align with that. Maybe it's a CD, maybe it's certain interest rates. Another thing that sometimes people don't think about is, I hate to say this in the world of self-checkout, but you can actually go into your bank and talk to a banker. You can do that. Let's say grandma won the lottery and said, here's a cool $500. Why don't we take that money and put it into some type of a high yield savings or something like that? You can go in and talk to somebody and actually explain your situation. You don't have to go in doing the math on your own or doing only your own research.
I haven't been inside a brick and mortar bank, oh my gosh, in years. But actually, thank you for bringing that up because that's an important thing to think about as well. So if, like yourself, you're somebody who wants to just talk to someone and don't really have the patience to be looking at articles and reading stuff online, then you might not want to go, for example, for an online bank because they usually don't have any physical locations. But if you're more just do it yourself, don't want to talk to anyone, then an online bank might be better for you.
For the credit union perspective, if there's anything involving what line of employment you're in, or I think for some credit unions, it could be like a social group, maybe a church or some type of like community bond of some sort. That is your overlapping reason of being a union. There can be a lot of ways for you to actually get more clarification than a quick Google. I know it's the easiest. I work in SEO, it's my line of work, but it doesn't always yield the best for your situation or circumstance specifically. Like most things in finance, you got to do your homework a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, if you can get free financial advice from just going into a bank and talking to someone, then why not?
So before we close out, is there anything else that you would want to tell our listeners about when it comes to choosing the bank, who you're giving your cash to?
The only other thing I have to say to listeners is I know that choosing a bank account can be overwhelming, especially when you're choosing your first one. But know that there's always an opportunity, again, to open a different bank if you don't like the bank that you're with. And banking should be a positive experience and one that you enjoy and one that comes with ease as well. I know when I first chose a bank, I did not think about that. And honestly, I just chose the first one that I saw that looked like a good bank. And I didn't think about what my needs were. But now that I know more, I'm able to basically make more informed decisions. And I've been able to choose different accounts that fit my financial needs and that are helping me to reach my financial goals. So just keep that in mind.
Couldn't agree more. Explore your options. Make sure they fit your financial circumstance. Well, thank you for joining us, Elizabeth.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. So as always, listeners can learn more about an array of financial topics for free at IBKRcampus.com. Follow us on your favorite podcast network and feel free to leave us a rating or review. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for listening to IBKR's Sense of Security. As always, there's more content at IBKRpodcast.com. And if you're interested in learning more about interactive brokers, visit IBKR.com. We offer more trading education content such as webinars, market commentary, market-related courses, and quant-related articles at IBKRcampus.com.
The analysis in this material is provided for information only and is not and should not be construed as an offer to sell or the solicitation of an offer to buy any security. To the extent that this material discusses general market activity, industry or sector trends, or other broad-based economic or political conditions, it should not be construed as research or investment advice. To the extent that it includes references to specific securities, commodities, currencies, or other instruments, those references do not constitute a recommendation by IBKR to buy, sell, or hold such investments. This material does not and is not intended to take into account the particular financial conditions, investment objectives, or requirements of individual customers. Before acting on this material, you should consider whether it is suitable for your particular circumstances and, as necessary, seek professional advice.